Good afternoon to everyone on the call. Thank you for joining us for this regionally focused media availability on the wildfire situation in the Nadina, Bulkley-Nechako, Vanderhoof, and Fort St. James regions. The BC Wildfire Service is here to provide the latest information to people living in these areas and an update on response operations. Participants on the call today are primarily focused on response right now. Their time is limited, so we will keep it to one question per media outlet and allow additional if we have time at the end. We invite media outlets to follow up with the appropriate ministry or organization for any unanswered questions. You can also reach out to Tara Gostelow for help triaging. Media interested in asking a question, please press star 1 to enter the queue. I'll now hand it over to Cliff Chapman, Director of Operations for the BC Wildfire Service.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Cliff Chapman. I'm the Director of Provincial Operations for BC Wildfire Service. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today while we do a very regionally focused update on our two of our most hardest hit areas as it pertains to fire activity over the course of the last number of days and forecast to be for the next number of days ahead. The intent of today's call, I will do a very quick provincial overview on number of fires and resourcing, as well as potential weather coming in. But more importantly, I'll be handing it off to two colleagues within BC Wildfire Service to do very specific updates for a significant amount of fire on the landscape in the Northwest Fire Center, as well as adjacently in the Prince George Fire Center. Before we jump in, I guess first off, I'd like to acknowledge that I'm calling in today from Kamloops area, the traditional territory of the Secwepemc people. I'm honored to live, work, and play on this territory. Obviously, the situation across the province, but primarily in the central and northern part of the province over the last number of days, has been significant. We have seen more fire on the landscape in terms of number of starts, as well as the continuation of hectares burned on the landscape than we have seen in previous years at this point in time. At this point in time, we have over 1,000 fires that have started since April in BC, and currently have still just under 400 of those fires currently burning. The more significant, or at least as significant number, is the just over 1.2 million hectares that have burnt so far this year. Compared to our 10-year average, which is roughly 76,000 hectares, it is a significant wildfire season in this province. I want to just express, on behalf of BC Wildfire Service, the Ministry of Forests, and the provincial government, just express our empathy for the people who are impacted in those communities, around those communities, whether it be First Nation communities, local governments, industry, stakeholders, folks that generally use the land base for their means. We recognize it has been impactful, and I want to just issue a sincere thank you to all the communities who have been so welcoming to our staff, who want to work with us to get to a common outcome of really limiting these impacts that fires are having on the landscape. It has been really heartwarming for BC Wildfire Service to feel welcome into the communities in which we are present right now. Local governments and First Nation governments wanting to work with us on solutions to the challenge of the fire season that we are up against, and we can't do it without you. And so I just want to issue a sincere thank you to everybody, including the general public, who you are a big source of our detection right now for new fires. Those of you who live in the north know that it's been very smoky. Know that there is lots of fire on the landscape, and it is difficult to detect fires. It is the public who is calling in so many of our fires right now, and we truly appreciate your diligence and you calling into our 1-800 number or star 5555 on your cell phone. Really quickly, just on a provincial overview, I mentioned a couple of the stats already. I just want to touch on one that I haven't, and we haven't over the last number of days. Over the course of the last week, 7 days, BC has received roughly 51,000 lightning strikes. That's not it's not significantly above average for us, but in that short of a period of time, it is above average. And of those 51,000 strikes, 76 of them have been in the Prince George and Northwest Fire Centers. And in both of those areas, and both the areas we'll be touching on today, we have seen lightning sort of develop each day and start new fires in the same general area where we already have fire on the landscape, which is very challenging for our ground resources, for our response operations, because it shifts our winds. It brings significant fire behavior. And in many cases over the course of the last 7 days, it has not come with very much rain, if any rain at all. So the fire conditions that we're faced with in the northern half of the province and starting to see it also in the south, they are extreme. The conditions, the fuel conditions are dry. We're continue to see temperatures and raise above 30 or close to 30. Relative humidities are dropping lower. And so we see this fire activity every afternoon that is significant. And really, I think over the course of the next 10 days, we do not see a significant break in the weather. We're going to see some scattered showers in BC over the course of the next 4 or 5 days. It will not be enough. It will be a good reprieve for our response operations, but we need a significant more amount of rain than what's forecasted. And we're going to continue to see hot and dry weather for the next 2 weeks, which is going to continue to challenge our fire operations and our ground personnel. We have had 392 fires in the last 7 days. 230 of those fires remain out of control, and many of those fires are present in the 2 fire centers that are with us today, representing Prince George and Northwest Fire Centers. We have now increased to 17 fires of note. I believe a week ago today we were at 4, maybe moving up to 8, and now we're at 17. So we are seeing more of a widespread impact of very significant fire on the landscape. To quickly touch on resources, we have just over 2,000 resources actively working fires in this province right now. We have requested just right around 1,000 more resources to come and support us through the Canadian Interagency Forest Fire Center. We have not received an answer on that request, but we are confident that we're going to see over the coming 6 to 10 days, we are going to see roughly 200 to 300 staff from Australia, Mexico, as well as the United States coming to support our effort. And we're obviously looking forward to having those resources come into the province. In addition to the ground personnel, we have 101 helicopters working for BC Wildfire right now. And we have an aircraft fleet, a fixed wing aircraft fleet. So that's our tanker program. We have 35 airplanes that are supporting us with aviation operations. So we have a fairly significant aviation operation right now, as well as a ground operation, which we are continuing to try to add to with support of other agencies. It is worth noting that we are not short 1,000 firefighters in BC at this point in time. We are trying to balance, knowing that it's so early in July. We're not even at the middle of July yet. We have a significant amount of time left in this fire season unless we see a break in weather. So we are planning ahead, obviously looking into next week, but even looking into the next number of weeks, trying to secure resources so that we can rest our staff who have to get rest and go home and recover so that they are more effective on the fire line. And so a large part of that ask for the 1,000 additional resources is really to balance our rest and recovery, to have the ability to surge to new fires. As we see lightning formulating again today, we need to have capacity to respond to new fires that we're not suppressing right now because they don't exist. But more importantly, it's the ability to rest our staff. So with that, again, today the focus is on the Northwest Fire Center, as well as the Prince George Fire Center. I'm joined by 2 of my colleagues today. I'm going to start with the Northwest Fire Center, and I'm going to turn it over to Ryan Chapman, who is the Deputy Fire Center Manager out of Smithers, and he will give us an update on what is happening in the Bulkley-Nechako, sort of Nadina area, as well as the Smithers area. Ryan, over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Cliff, and good afternoon to everyone. So I'm going to zoom in on the Northwest Fire Center and particularly the Nadina fire zone, where we are seeing activity across the fire center, but the intent of my update today is really to give those communities in and around the fires in Nadina an idea of exactly what's happening out there, what our strategies and tactics are, and maybe most importantly, what I think we can expect over the coming days and weeks. So, and I do have a slide deck shared there, want some materials, and I'll refer to a couple photos and maps throughout this update. So to date, there's been 159 wildfires reported in the Northwest Fire Center, and this is significantly above our 10-year average, where typically we'd only have 47 at this time. What's most notable is that 64 of those wildfires were reported in the 3-day period between July 7th and July 9th. a small success in this very difficult situation we're in. So of those 64 fires that started in those 3 days, 24 of them are either being held under control or out at this time. So we are having success on small fires when we detect them and are able to attack them early. And I think that's a key piece we want to explain. When we get this many starts due to the lightning that Cliff alluded to, it's really important for us to be prioritizing and dealing with the fires in a priority sequence and where we have viable objectives. With the conditions that we're in, not all fires and on all flanks are able to be suppressed at this time. Currently, we have 92 active fires in the Northwest, and we're focusing the majority of our resources on the highest priority ones. The photo you see on this slide is of the Tintagle fire near Burns Lake. This is from a couple days ago, and I'm going to refer back. You can see the machine guard that we've put in downslope of the main fire and how the fire is burnt right close to that guard. And it's a really positive situation. And when I discuss the map and some of our tactics, I want us to have that mental image of this photo right here. Really important note, I kind of give the background of where we're at in terms of starts. And Cliff alluded to the long-term weather, which we might see a couple days. We're forecast to see a couple days over the weekend. We'll see a slight downturn, but the long-term forecast is relatively dire. There's no significant precip in the forecast. All the fires that I'm going to be referring to today, we are expecting to grow. And I'll explain how we're trying to focus and have them grow in the less detrimental direction. So on the screen here now is a map of the Tintagle fire, and specifically the west side of the fire, where it's fairly close to Boar Mountain, which you can see here. And one of our main tactics and priorities, or our main priority, is to prevent these fires from impacting life and property. So focusing on this west side of the fire, closest to Burns Lake, and the south part of the fire that's over the Tintagle residential area. So these two blue arrows indicate where we're going close to the fire. So we have had favorable winds out of the west. We have been able to get quite close to the fire. So we're using heavy equipment, bulldozers, excavators, followed up by ground crews. And we have established a guard from this line here, which is a main 500 kilowatt transmission line. We're building that guard as close to the fire's edge as possible. And our main goal is to try to stop the fire at that guard. At the same time, these yellow areas indicate where we're at the same time we're building contingency machine guards. If we're not successful close to the fire, we will have other plans further away. And again, building off this transmission line, which is a great pre-established fuel break for us. We don't have any imminent plans for large-scale ignitions, but I do want to use this opportunity to let the public know, especially in places like Burns Lake and Houston, where you're seeing a fire basically in your backyard. That could be one of the tools that is used in the coming weeks as these fires evolve. The other thing I'd say, and it's where that photo was taken from, so this transmission line that runs east-west, it's a great pre-established boundary for us. We've had a ton of success so far on the Tintagle fire. We've kept all of it above, uphill and north of that transmission line. And we've got a lot of heavy equipment and crews focused on maintaining that. I'm just going to talk about one more thing. I'm not going to go into too much detail on all the fires. We've got question time at the end, but what I just painted there on the west end of the Tintagle fire, it's very similar tactics for the Parrot Lookout fire and the Peacock Creek fire. We're going close where we can. We're building contingency guards. We're prioritizing protecting life and property. We're still also trying to get a handle on getting around these fires in their entirety. We know the resource values in the area are important as well. Just to put into perspective the volume of fires we're dealing with, and a note, if people are considering entering the backcountry, there's multiple significant fires all over the landscape. So this is a photo of the Peacock Creek fire. But in the background, far distance, you can see the Parrot Lookout fire, just to get a sense of how much fire is out there. So if you are considering going into the backcountry, we ask that you are aware of where the fires are. Use our app, use our webpage. And in addition, with the amount of lightning that we've received over the last 7 days, it's almost a certainty that we're going to continue to pick up new fires. We're running air patrols every day. We appreciate the public finding fires and phoning them in. We are expecting to keep finding new fires and addressing those as quickly as we can while they're small. And we're also expecting these large fires that we have to grow. I'm going to turn it over to Todd Flanagan. He's the incident commander for the Vanderhoof Fort St. James area.
Thank you, Ryan. My name is Todd Flanagan. I am the incident commander for Incident Management Team 4. It's currently in place in the Vanderhoof Fort St. James zone. We've had 54 new wildfires since July 7th. 63 fires are currently burning. Majority of those are out of control. Aggressive fire behavior and heavy smoke is expected to continue through the next several days. At this time, our main objective is to keep transportation corridors open for access and egress to support fire operations and all evacuation routes. So we've had a significant number of fires and hectares burning within the zone. Currently, in the Vanderhoof G4 zone, there's 36 active wildfires, 2,500 hectares currently burning. In the Fort St. James G5 zone, we have 27 active wildfires, 35,000 plus hectares actively burning. The #1 priority for the BC Wildfire Service is to ensure the safety of first responders and all personnel. All wildfire response personnel, including our stakeholders. It's all from me.
Thank you very much, Ryan in the Northwest Fire Center, and Todd Flanagan, who's our incident commander in Vanderhoof representing the Prince George Fire Center. Before we turn it over to questions, I just want to reiterate a couple pieces that both Ryan and Todd mentioned, is that with the amount of fire on the landscape, and even if we didn't have as much as we have currently, our first priority is responder and public safety. That is what our staff, that's what our response teams are prioritizing at this time. As Todd mentioned, that's about keeping critical transportation corridors open. It's obviously about First Nation communities and local government, local communities in terms of potential impacts to those communities. And this is how we are prioritizing our fires and our resources on those fires. It's also important to note that even if we see significant amount of resources on any one of our fires that are up in these two areas right now, that does not mean that we will have success in suppression operations. The conditions are extreme. The fuels are as dry as we've seen them perhaps in our history. We had a call earlier today about the drought challenge in BC. That has also supported the fire season that we are in right now, and that we can likely expect to be in for at least July and August, and likely moving into September. And so with that, I just want to, I guess, just once again, urge caution to the public. Do not take unnecessary risks right now. We appreciate all the support you are offering to our staff on the ground within the communities in which you are seeing fire out your back window. We know this is a stressful time, and we will work together. We will get through it together. And it has the likelihood of being quite a long and challenging season. And we will do everything we can in BC Wildfire Service to continue to bring in resources, to continue to put resources on these high priority fires and try to move them away from the communities and or fully suppress them. But we are up against a very challenging situation weather-wise, as well as conditions as we headed into this fire season, which we spoke about on previous media availabilities. So with that, I think we'll turn it over to questions. I have, or today we have myself, obviously the two individuals that just spoke, Todd Flanagan in Prince George and Ryan Chapman in the Northwest. We're also joined by Ian Cunnings, who is with Emergency Management and Climate Ready BC, should there be questions around evacuations and some of the large highway corridors and those types of questions. So I will turn it over to questions, and I will direct them accordingly based on what your question is.
Thanks very much, Cliff. A reminder to media on the line, please press *1 to enter the queue. Because time is limited and the folks on the call today are primarily focused on response, we're going to limit it to one question per outlet. However, please do re-queue if you have additional questions, and if we have time, we will get back to you. Our first question today comes from Randy Adams, CBC.
Taking my question. I just wanted to know, it's hot, it's dry, resources are being spread across the province, mainly up in the north, and you want the ability to rest staff, but if things really get out of control and you don't have enough staff or wildfire fighters, when will the trigger be pulled for more help to come in, and how will this potential situation be triaged?
So thank you very much for the question. I'll take this one. So the situation, I would say, based on your question, is we're there right now. We are prioritizing our fires. We are surging resources to the fires that have the highest potential impact. We're continuing to attempt to resource all the fires that are burning in BC, but obviously with a prioritization of the fires that have the most potential impact and or are already impacting communities and critical infrastructure. I just want to note that we have been asking for support in BC for the better part of the last month. It is very, very challenging across Canada and across the globe right now to secure additional firefighting capacity. Fortunately, right now, we have roughly 180 staff in BC from Mexico and the United States. As I mentioned, we will see another 200 to 300, hopefully up to 400 over the course of the next 10 days. And we have requested an additional 1,000, not to all come at once, but to come over the course of the next number of weeks so that we can balance rest and recovery of our staff. This is a very dangerous job. With the conditions that we're in, it makes it all that much more dangerous for our staff, who are working 14, 16, 20-hour days to try to do everything they can to move these fires away from critical impacts. And so we will continue to see resources being asked for from our organization. There is no restriction on how many resources we can request, and we will continue to plan ahead for the next 2.5 months to attempt to have enough resources in BC to surge to the priority fires. The challenge with that is that at this point in time, resources are thin across Canada, with Quebec, Alberta, and Ontario all also experiencing fairly significant fire seasons, Ontario less so, and other jurisdictions holding high hazard across Canada. So the likelihood of seeing Canadian resources in BC is quite low right now. We have been very fortunate to get the support we have from Mexico and the United States. And the United States is a big part of this ask that we have for the additional 400 to 1,000 staff over the next few weeks.
Our next question comes from Dan Messick of CICK News, CICK Radio Smithers, rather. Please go ahead.
Thanks very much, and I appreciate all the work all the fire crews are doing to keep us safe. My question is similar. Obviously, this is a big issue around resources and the limitations of those resources. Obviously, we are not in a full-on state of emergency across the province yet, but do you see that coming? When do you expect that to happen? And have there been conversations already with the federal government about getting other resources, not only now, but into the future, the next couple of months and beyond? Because clearly this is going to continue to happen into this year and years to come.
Great question. Thank you very much. I'll speak to the federal government question, and then I'll turn it over to Ian with Emergency Management and Climate Ready to speak to the provincial state of emergency. So we have been working with our federal partners over the course of the last couple of weeks. We are in formal process with the federal government requesting assistance. So that's in the form of, really takes two forms. We have requested ground personnel from the federal government, and we have requested aviation assets from the federal government at this time. So we're just finalizing an agreement between BC and the federal government right now, and hopefully, I don't have the numbers right now until it's signed off, but it's not insignificant, and we do need the support of the federal government. Ian, I'll turn it over to you for the provincial declaration.
Great, thanks, Cliff. Yeah, with regards to the state of local emergencies, right now there are approximately 28 evacuation orders around the province that enable local governments to, on the recommendation of BC Wildfire, to ask people to unfortunately leave their homes. We're constantly working with Indigenous communities, local governments, and our partners at BC Wildfire to evaluate what the emergency needs or urgent needs are. And if it comes to a point where the powers of the provincial state of local emergency are required, then that will be taken into consideration. But at this time, the various evacuation orders and other needs are being met through the state of local emergency.
Thanks very much. Our next question comes from Jack Clark, CKPG News. Jack, please go ahead.
Hi, thank you for taking my question today. Wanted to go back when you guys talked about the likelihood of finding more emerging fires over the next kind of 10 days and kind of reference it to the Nechako fire in the Northwest Fire Center. What's the concern like of fires merging with each other and becoming bigger, more impactful fires? And how does that change the approach of attacking the fires?
Thanks for the question. I will just quickly touch on the potential of fires, but then I will throw it to Ryan Chapman to talk specifically about your question. One consideration in our planning in BC Wildfire Service right now is with 51,000 lightning strikes over the last 7 days and very little rain associated with those lightning strikes, but some local precipitation where the strikes actually hit. There is potential for the next sort of 10 days for those fires to smolder around and not give off a significant smoke signal, and therefore be very difficult to detect. And what that means is that as we get into more of a hot and dry conditions and we stop kind of seeing this thunderstorm trend that we've seen for the last 7 days, but we get more the typical sun is out in the morning and stays out all day, some of those fires will start to pop up and potentially have significant resource challenges and potential impacts based on where the lightning has hit. We are obviously planning our detection routes. Our patrol planes are out looking at those routes so that we can try to get them right away when they do pop up. But we refer to this in wildfire as holdover lightning fires. And at times, and with the conditions we have right now, fires can hold over for up to 2 weeks. And that's something that we're trying to pay particularly close attention to, so that as that sun does start to come out more holistically through the day, we don't have fires that pop out at 100 hectares or 1,000 hectares. So that's a big part of our planning and our detection network that we're deploying and will continue to deploy for the summer. With that, I'll throw to Ryan Chapman to speak about the second part of your question.
Yeah, just wanted to address the scenario where fires merge, and that's definitely something we look at and anticipate. So if you have been following our fire of note page, the Nechako fire and what used to be the Sheraton fire were fairly adjacent. We managed those as one incident commander. We've had a ton of support from forest industry on what was 2 fires, and we would move that heavy equipment back and forth depending where the objectives were on each day. So now those 2 fires have merged. We're just calling it the Nechako fire. And yeah, that's something we anticipate, and we set up our operations accordingly to manage the event of fires merging.
Okay, we have time for one more question. It goes to Morgan Budden of CFNR News. Thanks again, everybody, for bearing with us. If you do have additional questions, please feel free to direct them to the appropriate fire center or through myself, Tara Costello. Morgan, final question, please go ahead.
Hi, thanks for taking my question. I was wondering if you have any numbers of evacuees in the Northwest Fire Center and Prince George Fire Center, and also what would be the benchmark to declare a provincial state of emergency?
Thank you for the question. I will hand it over to Ian Cunnings with Emergency Management and Climate Ready BC.
Hey, about with regards to evacuees, I don't have it broken down by fire center, but I can give it to you in terms of region. So within the northeast region, which for the most part is the Prince George Fire Center, but also encompasses the Caribou Fire Center, there are currently 11 evacuation orders that is affecting, and this is based on StatsCan numbers, 39 individuals or 39 people and 66 homes. In the Northwest region, we currently have 16 evacuation orders and 281 those are homes under orders, and a population showing of 157 impacted under those orders. In terms of the provincial state of emergency, it's really what powers are required by either other provincial ministries, if they don't already have that, through their various legislation, or more support required by local government. So there isn't one trigger that we would use for that. But as I mentioned earlier, we're in daily conversations with Indigenous and local governments, as well as our partners at BC Wildfire. And if it was deemed necessary for a provincial state of emergency, then that would be considered.
Thank you very much, everyone. That concludes today's wildfire media availability. Have a good afternoon.